Yes! At this very moment, we're a little over 2 weeks away from the end of Season 6 of Destiny 2, but also the beginning of Season 7. And as of presently, the only thing that's been discussed about Season 7 is the new Crown of Sorrow raid that'll be available the same day the Season of Opulence goes live. And since we don't know a lot about what Season of Opulence will give us, I compiled a wish list / prediction list of things I'd like to see and or things I think will happen in Season of Opulence. So without further ado, let's get it in. First off, let's talk about the Leviathan raid's weapons. I'm bringing this up because it's been confirmed that we'll be returning to the Leviathan in Season of Opulence. Now, weapon-wise, the Year 1 raids had it going, and despite the fact that Year 1 weapons were incapable of random rolls, the Leviathan's weapons are still some of the best and are still used prevalently in Year 2. Midnight Coup is probably still the most commonly used legendary hand cannon for PvE, and Inaugural Address and Alone as a God are still decently popular in PvP. In fact, back in Year 1, I changed the element of my Sins of the Past to Solar and used this same exact weapon towards the 200 Solar kills for the Luna's Howl quest. The lack of random rolls for these weapons didn't stop the player base from using them in Year 2, and aside from that, I'd say that these are still some of the best looking weapons in the game to this day. That's pretty much a given that these weapons will be returning with random rolls, but I could really see the Year 1 perk tree being used for the curated roll versions of these weapons. For example, the curated Midnight Coup will have Outlaw and Rampage, whereas the curated Inaugural Address will have Outlaw and Kill Clip. As stated previously, the Leviathan weapons are still some of the most favorite, and I couldn't see their curated rolls being anything differently than what we currently have. By use of my horrible Photoshop skills, I put together pictures of what I believe the curated roll versions of Midnight Coup and Inaugural Address could look like. I wanted to give them different masterworks, but I felt that these ones were a lot more realistic because Bungie designed curated rolls to be viable, not the most powerful roll that you can get. It's been confirmed that Season of Opulence will introduce a new raid known as Crown of Sorrow, and due to the fact that we'll be returning to the Leviathan, it would make zero sense for the Year 1 raids to stay locked in Year 1. And if they did stay locked in Year 1, there wouldn't be a bigger missed opportunity than this, but I'm almost for certain that the Spire Stars and Eater of Worlds raid layers will be updated to Year 2 relevancy. This would mean that the challenges for each of these raids would be in the form of a bounty from Hawthorne, and it will only make sense for these raids to have raid banner compatibility. The raid banner was introduced in Season 4 and has become almost a necessity to use before every raid encounter. The Shattered Throne was introduced in Season 4 and is the first PvE activity to be referred to as a dungeon, and almost 9 months after its introduction, it's still one of the most entertaining in-game activities in this game. The Leviathan raid partook on Nessus, and since we'll be returning to the Leviathan in Season of Opulence, it would be pretty cool to see a dungeon on Nessus. If that does end up happening, it'd be safe to assume that we'd be fighting what's left of the Red Legion, or what if Bungie threw us for a loop and gave us a secret exotic mission similar to the Whisper mission in 0 Hour? You see, nobody ever expected the Outbreak to return since it was a raid exotic in D1, so what if we ended up getting a time-based secret mission where we'd fight the Vex, and the Vex Mythic class would be the end reward? I don't see this as completely unlikely anymore, considering that the Vex are also present on Nessus, and once again, nobody would have ever guessed that the secret exotic mission would have been a raid exotic. Vex Mythic class was not only one of the most beloved exotic weapons in Destiny 1, it was also a weapon that Destiny 1 veterans would love to see return. The Leviathan, Last Wish, and Scourge of the Past raids have their own exclusive exotic weapon. Legend of Acrius comes from the Leviathan, 1000 Voices comes from Last Wish, and Anarchy comes from Scourge of the Past. Now, I don't believe that it's a coincidence that all of these weapons are in the heavy slot, and to make matters worse, Legend of Acrius is the only quest-based raid exotic in Destiny 2. In Season of Opulence, I'd really love for the Crown of Sorrows raid exotic to be a quest-based primary weapon in the kinetic slot. The kinetic slot really needs some love, and since we have primary ammo weapons in the energy slot alongside fusion rifles, sniper rifles, and shotguns, which could only exist in a special slot in D1, it's definitely safe to say that there's not enough going on in the kinetic slot, and this entire realization is even more odd when you notice that every exotic raid weapon from Destiny 1 were primaries. Don't forget about the fact that there are also too many exotic heavy weapons in the game, and it makes it very difficult to choose which one to use. With that realization in mind, think of the elusive drop rate of the 1000 Voices in Anarchy and how the entire Destiny 2 player base will agree how frustrating this is. I personally know people who ran the Last Wish and Scourge of the Past raids up to 50 times before the respective exotics for these raids finally dropped for them. It's been stated that Bungie's reasoning for making the 1000 Voices and Anarchy random drops was so that we get a similar ecstatic feeling to the first time we obtained the Vex Mythic class. Yeah, I see why Bungie would do this, but the drop rates for the 1K and Anarchy were entirely too low, and after running the raids a ludicrous amount of times to get nothing is not exciting at all. I was in the Xbox Live party talking to a few friends a few days back, and one of them says something about the Leviathan being a patrol zone, and I instantly thought of how amazing of an idea this would be and how much sense it would make. We didn't get any new patrol zones in seasons 5 and 6, so something like this would be a breath of fresh air. The only comparison I can make to this is the Dreadnought from Destiny 1. The Dreadnought and the Leviathan are both planet-sized spaceships and are the destination for a raid. However, the Dreadnought was also a patrol zone, and 2 of Destiny 1 strikes partook here. Oh, and let's not forget about the Court of Oryx. The only equivalent activity we have in Destiny 2 to the Court of Oryx would be the Blind Well. So I'd like to see something similar take place on the Leviathan if it becomes a patrol zone in Season 7. However, there will be a new 6-person activity introduced in Season 7, which could potentially be something similar to Court of Oryx, and for all we know, it could also take place on the Leviathan. By the time Season of Opulence goes live, we'll be 3 months away from Destiny 2 hitting its 2nd year since release, and one of the most frustrating things about this game is the fact that a huge chunk of the game is still left behind in Year 1. All the planetary vendors, for the exception of the Dreaming City and Tangled Shore, offer nothing Year 2 pertinent. I know for a fact that nobody is content with the fact that the majority of the loot in this game has very minimal use in Year 2, and if there's one thing that the entire player base wants to change, it's this. The Forsaken expansion turned over a new leaf for Destiny 2 and put the game on the right path, and it could be perceived as an apology for the game's past incompetence. But Season of Opulence could potentize that same apology by showing some love to all the weapons and armor of the past. Since Season 7 is sending us back to the Leviathan, which was a prominent Year 1 activity, I couldn't see a better opportunity than now for this to happen. I speak for the entire player base when I say that armor cosmetics have always been an issue in Destiny 2, and to some extent, they've become worse. In Destiny 2's first year, none of the armor was particularly amazing looking, if I have to be honest, but a few of the armor sets actually look better than a lot of the armor sets that we have in Year 2. It doesn't help that we haven't had any new armor added to the Vanguard and Crucible inventory since Season 4, and legendary armor ornaments haven't been in the game since the Warmind era. And to this day, some of the best looking armor in the game is obtained through Eververse, making this entire realization even worse. The entire annual pass is $35. Now, if you split that into 3 ways, it'd be $11.67. That's less than $12 worth of content for each of the 3 annual pass DLCs, which means that we'll be hopefully getting around $12 worth of brand new content in Season 7. But the re-release of reworked Year 1 weapons and armor would be free since we already own it. And if this happens, Season of Opulence will offer the most content out of the entire annual pass, which would make a lot of sense considering that Season of Opulence will end with another Solstice of Heroes event before we go into Year 3. Destiny 2's vendors have also been relatively mundane as well, and for the most part are left behind in Year 1 as well. Without the choice of choosing between a weapon or armor package, Commanders of Valor and Lord Shaxx's inventory sucks, and many players have been complaining that their Crucible and Vanguard tokens have been gathering dust, and I definitely feel the same way. Destiny 2's Year 2 loot pool is already super narrow, and there's nothing to get excited about when turning in tokens. It would be really nice to see something done about this in Season 7 because I have a couple thousand Crucible and Vanguard tokens sitting in my vault, and I refuse to turn them in because there's literally no point. The Gunsmith is getting his own bounties, which will reward mod components and enhancement cores, and this is great and all, but if nothing is going to be done about how expensive it is to get a weapon from him, Gunsmith's materials will be another currency that players won't feel incentivized to spend. It doesn't help that even when you do decide to roll the dice and spend 100 Gunsmith materials to get a weapon from the Gunsmith, there's a super high chance that you will get something that you either didn't want or something you have 0 use for. Zenobia D is in the general loot pool and in the Gunsmith loot pool at the same time, and this seems to be the only weapon I ever get from the Gunsmith, whereas in Year 1, all of the Gunsmith weapons could only be obtained from him and him only. To completely remove the mediocrity of this, it'd be nice to see Arms Day from Destiny 1 return or something equivalent. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about how useless most of Destiny 2's vendors are, but I hope that something is done about it at some point in time during Season 7. But yeah, that does it for this one, everybody. I'm hoping that Season of Opulence takes care of business and wraps up the Year 2 nicely before we head into Year 3. If you enjoyed this video and made it to the end, do me a favor and drop a like. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, click that subscribe button to stay in tune for more elite gaming content. And with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.
I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.